I came in today thinking that we were going to discuss why the Houston Texans have a running back problem, Paul. But then they surprised us. Not Derrick Henry, not Saquon Barkley, not DeAndre Swift. We got the report yesterday that Joe Mixon was getting cut. And then all of a sudden, about an hour ago, Paul, we got news that the Houston Texans have traded for Joe Mixon. We don't know the details yet. Feels like probably just a late round swap because he was getting cut. So the Texans just swooped in and made sure they could secure his services for at least this year. But Joe Mixon is a Houston Texan. And all of a sudden, the running back room, after losing Devin Singletary to the Giants, right now it feels pretty good to me, Paul. How do you feel?
I'm surprised by the move. My mom once told me I'm running out of options from a dating perspective, and it's clear that the Houston Texans were running out of options, seeing as we saw Derrick Henry now sign a deal with the Baltimore Ravens not too long ago. There aren't many running backs that are left available, and perhaps because they bid a little bit lower than what the Eagles did for Saquon Barkley, and maybe they were in on some of the other running backs available, this, I guess, became their only option. He is a good player. He's a versatile player. Is he still the same guy he used to be? I don't know. What strikes me with this move, though, is that in Joe Mixon, we're talking about a guy who's been a POS off the field. Multiple incidents. October 2014, where he punched a girl in the face. And then, of course, just last year, he allegedly pointed a gun at a woman in downtown Cincinnati, telling her, "You should be popped in the face. I should shoot you now. The police can't get me," allegedly. So I suppose for all those people out there who are constantly mad that the Houston Texans are always a roster of Boy Scouts, maybe you're doing a little fist pump, but an under-the-table fist pump because you don't want to be canceled for approving of the Texans bringing in a guy like this. I suppose it's a new era. Is it a new era because this is the guy the Texans wanted, or is it a new era because the Texans ran out of options? I tend to think it's the latter.
It's interesting because I do view this as a last resort in a lot of ways. They probably knew that they weren't going to be getting Derrick Henry, even though 2 years, $16 million to the Baltimore Ravens, and it can cap out at $20 million is pretty reasonable compared to what Saquon Barkley got. But at his age, and did you believe he had 2 more good years left in him? I'm not sure, versus paying Joe Mixon $6 million. But to the point of this is a new era versus just your last option, I think it's more of a new era. That maybe the Texans of being a good old boy and having a clean record, maybe that's going away a little bit. And even if this wasn't their last option, maybe it's a sign of things to come going forward. Now, we saw last year, clearly they chose Will Anderson over Jalen Carter. We don't know if Jalen Carter was ever really in the mix for the Texans. There was reports that they were out on him, but then others would say they're still in. So it's a bit unclear about how they feel philosophically now about players with a past. Joe Mixon, I was surprised because of what you said, that based on the history of this organization, they don't normally do things like this. It's really not it's cliche, it's corny, but the Texans way is not usually this.
Not Texans worthy, I believe. Was
that's right, Texans worthy
that we've seen from them before. I'm surprised by it. The running back room is better at the very least. So if you're looking at it from a football perspective, hey, they got a good player. But if you're looking at it from I want to like every single player on this team. I don't know if this is quite trading for Roberto Osuna, as some are bringing up on the Twitch, where it really felt like the Astros completely lost their innocence back in 2018.
They did.
But this is an incident that took place a long time ago, the 2014 incident. I suppose he's a young man. He can learn. He can change. I used to be of the belief, and I still am of the belief, that it's a privilege to play a sport professionally and earn millions of dollars. And that, yeah, you can get a second chance doing something else if you violently do something to somebody else. And it's something that happened in 2014. Okay, he had just turned 18. If you really want to look the other way, like the Bengals are so good at doing. That's what they do. They bring in guys at a discount because of checkered past.
Yeah.
A long list of guys like that. But, I mean, there was an incident within the last calendar year, and whether it's simply alleged or if it actually happened, the Texans seem to have looked the other way this time around.
Are you okay that they did that? Because I hear you about the idea of
I'm not happy about it.
You want to like the players on the team that you root for, that you talk about, and now you have a player that he brings that, he ruins that for you.
I'm not happy about it. Right. I look, this team was exceptionally likable, and I mean, fair or unfair, this is something that I will think about with Joe Mixon. And does that mean fair? Does that mean I'm damning him to hell or something like that? No, it doesn't mean that, but I don't know. Especially considering there's been a couple of things that, and not just this, there was another weird incident where I don't know if he was involved in it, but it also took place over the last couple of months. And it seemed like the Bengals were tired of him if they were going to release him. It's not like at least to my knowledge, the Bengals running back situation is going to be better in a post-Joe Mixon world. Who was the guy that they went after in free agency? Zach Moss? Is Zach Moss better than Joe Mixon? No. Zach Moss is a backup running back. So why were the Bengals willing to move on from Joe Mixon, who wasn't earning all that much money, is the other question I have. Like, they were going to cut him, and the Texans, because they don't want him, I guess, to get out on the open market and potentially sign a deal that's going to cost him a little bit more. He's just a cap hit of $6.1 million per Spotrac. I think that's why they did it. But okay, 1 year rental for what, a 6th, 7th round pick. The trade is not a problem to me. It's more, why did the Bengals want to trade him when he didn't cost them that much? And Zach Moss is clearly not on the same level as him.
I would assume that it's not really about Zach Moss, that even though he's there and he was a good player, he was the NFL leading rusher at one point last year.
After week 1, when was that?
It was a little bit later in the season before Jonathan Taylor got hurt. He had some good games.
Oh, yeah, I forgot that Taylor was hurt for such a long time.
Personally, I think it's more about what they saw at the end of the season with Chase Brown, the kid they drafted from Illinois. He was a 5th round pick last year. He's a good football player. So I think that him and Zach Moss will be the tandem. It'll cost you probably $4.5 million. It would have cost the Bengals closer to $8.5 million to keep Mixon on their roster. So, it's a 50% pay cut, I would say, to go from 1 running back to 2 running backs in this situation. So that's where I get it from the Bengals perspective. From a football perspective, I get why the Texans did it. I like that the Texans did it. You brought in a running back who, while he's not elite, and your running back room is not complete also. That's part of this. Like, you can't just be done. You need 2 running backs, and you have a running back now in Mixon who is a little bit older. Like, you have to go into the draft or still in free agency and address this position because it's still a major flaw in your roster. It might be the biggest flaw on the offense besides left guard. So you have to find a way to address that position still. But from a football perspective, I get it. From the person perspective, I really am shocked. I just did not think that this was something that the McNair family would okay.
Especially post Deshaun Watson.
Yeah. Now, you're not the Browns. You're not a team with Deshaun Watson, now Jameis Winston and Kareem Hunt all on the same team where, like, they just love scumbags. Like, they seem to just attract them nonstop. The Texans have one bad apple on their roster right now, it appears.
He is good at running back. He's a versatile player. His last game with the Bengals was the season finale against Cleveland, the Cleveland team that really wasn't trying that hard, and he had 111 yards in that game. So they got better at the position. It's just strange to me that they went this route, and it's also something I'm wondering about. Like, why would the Bengals give up on him other than the Bengals are cheap?
Yeah.
And, okay, maybe it's that, but these are the questions I have about the deal. They did upgrade, and to your point, yeah, you probably got to draft somebody. Maybe there's somebody else available in free agency that they can bring in. But I would say for the most part, it's just a different move by Nick Caserio and by this organization. And I do not blame the people who push back on it because of the stuff that he's done off the field.
I don't either. If there are Texans fans, now when Texans fans or when sports fans in general say, I'm not going to watch my team now because X player is on that team, I don't really believe
I'm
you.
skeptical of that too.
Yeah, I don't believe you. Astros fans said that about Roberto Osuna, and then they all watched the game. You might be unhappy every single time he's on the field or on the mound like he was with the Astros. Frankly, if you want to boo Joe Mixon every single time he touches the ball, it's your right. It's your ticket. You can boo him if you want.
But
you can be unhappy.
I mean, I think there's a lot of people who don't even know he did any of this.
No, they don't because
it's so long ago.
Yeah, and the one that happened last year was mostly allegedly.
It's alleged right now. Yes.
So there's not the vitriol with him, but it's still very unlike the Texans.
There's no video with Ray Rice and his
yes.
eventual, I believe, wife. So
yeah,
married after that. Wow, interesting.
Bold move by her. It's going to be interesting to see how this goes. Now, from the other part of this that is a positive, yeah, there's some kind of construction going. You hear that too, right, Paul?
Yeah, it's driving me crazy.
Okay,
I thought I was losing my mind.
I thought I was going crazy too for
There's
a second.
Some sort of vibration that's going on in the studio. I was like, oh, someone bring something in their luggage today? What's going on here?
Have you ever seen that happen in an airport, actually? Or is that just a TikTok prank?
I've seen the viral videos of it, and I'm pretty sure that these are just OnlyFans influencers who are like, oh no, there's something vibrating in my luggage.
It's a
I'm
toothbrush.
so embarrassed. Yeah, it's a toothbrush.
I think it's just a. I don't think maybe one person did it accidentally once, but they're too ashamed to like actually film it. The fact that you're like filming it, it's like
it's coming. Like it's in there.
Like, who films it when the TSA is like, we need to take a look at what's inside your bag? You're like, all right, hold on 1 second. All right, yeah, take a look and pull up their phone. And, like, no, they know what's happening.
Joe Mixon has been acquired by the Houston Texans. Will be their lead running back this year. Finished top 10 in the NFL this last year in rushing. Was 27th the year before. So the last 2 years, kind of one really good, one not so good. 2021, he was third in the NFL. So he's pretty consistent. I saw this stat that someone just posted on Twitter. Of all the running backs in the NFL since the year 2000 that have had over 1,600 carries, Joe Mixon has fumbled the least amount of times. You want to guess?
He's fumbled twice.
Twice last year.
Okay.
He's fumbled 6 times in his career.
Wow.
It's pretty good.
6 too many, right, Paul?
In my opinion, that's too many. Yeah.
Now you know what that means? Week 1 fumble out the back of the end zone against the Chiefs.
Without a doubt.
It's coming. That's 100% what's coming.
Deserve it if it happens. There's a couple of videos of Joe Mixon, including the infamous one that we touched on in the first segment. I forgot that there actually was a video of it. Watch it in the break. Holy crap. It's still jarring, even 10 years later. There's another moment, and maybe this is why he's better at not fumbling. Do you remember, I believe it was an Oklahoma-Ohio State game, where he's running down the sideline wide open for a touchdown, and he forgot to bring the ball into the end zone.
Oh, no. I don't remember that.
I remember it because I was thinking of reasons that he shouldn't be drafted.
Did he do the one of those where like the Deshaun Jackson where he just like dropped it as he was celebrating as he ran in the end zone?
Basically, yeah. And I hate that with a passion. So perhaps that was a lesson learned in that moment, and now he's slightly better than most running backs at not fumbling.
Yeah, that's like the number one sin in football. I think, is to have a clear, easy touchdown and then to intentionally drop the ball before you cross the...
It's the number one sin in football, at least the number 2 sin committed by Joe Mixon.
Yep.
At least the number 2.
At least number 2.
At least number 2.
So
maybe number 3.
It was, Oklahoma and against Ohio State, and he returns the kick down the right sideline. He is gone, and he fumbles the ball very clearly at the 2-yard line, and the refs did not notice it. So this is just something that they completely missed. As you can see right here, Joe, I've got it on my computer. There he is. Just drops the ball very clearly at the 1-yard line, like puts it behind him. What an idiot. But, hey, It's a new day here in Houston. You know, Clay Walker. Like, Clay Walker's made mistakes, right? Like, drive me smooth, mother bleeper. Joe Mixon's made mistakes. Everyone's made mistakes. I'm sure there are at least a couple of people in their car thinking right now, like, Paul, have you never made a mistake in your life? Well, I've made mistakes, but I don't know. I haven't punched a woman in the face. Haven't done that. Don't intend to do that.
That's good. I like working with you, Paul.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, please don't do that.
That would have been a terrible time for an admission.
Yeah. It was the worst time ever.
I'm glad that you haven't, to my knowledge.
I have not.
Joe.
Nope.
Sean, to my knowledge, you haven't as well.
I have not.
So, hey, you know, we all take things one day at a time, but that's one of the funny things that you'll see if you're pushing back against the Texans doing this, changing their stripes a little bit. You will get multiple people, not a majority, but enough of a group of people will respond saying, like, well, he deserves a second chance. What, you've never screwed up? I was like, yes, I've never beaten the bleep out of a woman. I've never done it. So, again, something you're going to have to get by if you are a fan of the Houston Texans. And guess what? Most people, no matter how much pushback they give to this in the immediacy, if Joe Mixon has a game where he runs for 120 yards, runs for a touchdown, catches a touchdown pass,
no one will care.
Everyone will forget.
Yeah, they won't be worried about it. Frankly, I think most Texans fans right now are okay with it anyways, because the way free agency went the last 26, 27 hours. Because they didn't sign any of these running backs. And it looked like, from my perspective, the number one panic button issue for Texans fans was that you didn't have a running back, that you lost Devin Singletary while going after Saquon Barkley.
And the market evaporated very quickly.
So that this is literally maybe your last guy that you could get, besides hoping that Nick Chubb got cut. Because the other guy we talked about in the past on the show was Alvin Kamara. Well, it's not like he has exactly a clean rap sheet either.
Nope.
So it was all hoping that Nick Chubb would get cut and that maybe he would be your guy or Derrick Henry would be your guy. And you know, Derrick Henry, the reporting never felt concrete that the Texans were really in on him. It'd be like, oh, like they're keeping an eye on it. But it was never that, you know, we got reports that the Ravens had made an official offer to Derrick Henry. We got that from Derrick Henry's agent. There was never anything like that from the Texans. So this was the last move that they can make. And from a football perspective, I get it. But from the 281, it's crazy how stark of a difference the different owners of the Texans have been handling signing people with troubled past. Bob McNair would have never. Well, the Texans, this is really their first one. Like, Deshaun Watson doesn't count for this conversation, to be honest. His troubled past occurred after he got here. Unless there's some hidden Clemson story that we don't know about. People tried to pretend like maybe there were these red flags before the draft. There were no red flags with Deshaun Watson. This was the first decision that, you know, Cal and Hannah had to make with a player of this caliber and with this history, and they chose to sign the player. So it is a different era.
Yep, and we'll see what it leads to. I do think yesterday was a good day for the Texans in free agency. I know
agree.
A lot of other people are like, well, they didn't get the running back I wanted. I like fantasy football, and I want them to get somebody that I know the name of. I know there was a lot of people like that, but they got two guys from the Tennessee Titans who were pretty good. As far as Danico Autry, 33-year-old guy who had 11 and a half sacks last season. 2 years, $20 million, 10 and a half guaranteed.
It's a pretty good deal.
That's a bargain. Will he be the same player this season that he was last year? I don't know. But they also got Azeez Al-Shaair. I know some people would have rather had Patrick Queen, but this is a guy who played with D'Amico Ryans in that defense in San Francisco, maybe overshadowed by Fred Warner, by Dre Greenlaw. And he played last year for the Titans, and he had a breakout season. And the Texans believe this is an upgrade over Blake Cashman. If you go to ESPN.com, the Texans defense is one of the big winners of free agency from those two moves, at least per one Bill Barnwell, who I don't always agree with, but I think those moves are better than people are going to give it credit for. But everyone wants the flashy toys because generally the collective IQ, football-wise, of the casual fan isn't very high. No offense, guys. It's not all about signing the big name running backs or like some of the other people out there I saw today were like, why aren't they signing Darnell Mooney?
No, he's gone.
When they brought Noah Brown back, who's perfectly capable as your third wide receiver. You have Nico Collins, you have Tank Dell, you have Dalton Schultz.
Yeah.
And you got Joe Mixon now too.
And you're pretty good there. Like, and he's a good pass catching back too. So now Danico Autry, I like that signing a lot. It's an older player. And last year, 11.5 sacks is a good flashy number. But if you look at the years before that, 8, 9, 7.5, then a 3.5 year, but then nine sacks again, going back to 2018. He's had over 7 sacks every year except for one since 2018 when he got traded to Indianapolis, or when he ended up in Indianapolis. That's a good career. That's a good player, on a fair contract. Now, Jonathan Grenard, I still would have liked him, but because they offsetted that with Danico Autry, I'm good with that move.
Yeah, I'm good with
okay
them letting Grenard walk. I feel like you replaced him. And it's maybe a short-term replacement, and you're hoping that the Texans find some more guys in the draft.
Yeah.
But free agency is not done. We are barely a day into the tampering window, and I would just like the majority of Texans fans to calm down. And I'm sure that this Joe Mixon trade has some Houston Texans fans calming down.
Maybe.
Some people are mad about me bringing negative energy about Mixon when he was a kid. This is on our YouTube at ESPN Houston. Like, subscribe, join our live stream.
I mean, like, one of the texts we got was like, he's a kid when that happened. I mean, if you can go to war, you're not a kid. Like, you can't legally drink, but you can do everything else.
It's funny, the excuses that we sometimes make, like, oh, so someone who's 17 and 18, they turn 18, they can't be a bastard before they turn 18, right? And okay, he had turned 18. I'm sorry, like, even if you were drinking there, like, wound up and just slugged the absolute bejesus out of her. So it happened, and that's something that doesn't just go away, especially when it's on video.